The heat had arrived prematurely. By mid-morning, the sky was washed out to a dead, bleached blue, and the wind made dry gusts that burned like nettles. Not a speck of green had lasted here in months. Across the furthest ragged line of structures at the boundary of town, the country fell flat and merciless. Beyond the splintered post fence and desiccated water troughs, there was a makeshift camp, barely that. Half of a canvas tent, worn with age, one corner ripped loose and flapping in the wind. Inside, Miriam Dane was motionless. Her belly had been knotted up in cramps since dawn. She hadn't eaten for 2 days. Her mother had left a sack of oats, but the twine knot was too hard, and her hands too weakened. The water she had drunk the previous evening now rested half-covered, overturned, the remainder absorbed into the dirt. Perspiration stuck to her skin. Flies buzzed. Her dark brown hair was grimy with sweat and dust, stuck to her sunburnt cheeks. Her legs, paralyzed since birth, had never budged. The lower half of her body had been dead weight, something she had mastered at dragging behind her silently. Her family had educated her early. Her condition was not to be discussed. Her father passed away 3 winters ago. By spring's return, her mother and brothers had depleted words and excuses. 2 mornings previous, when she heard them loading the cart, she knew. No shouting, no farewell, just soft words that it was best for everyone. They left her with oats, a water jug, and nothing more. Now, as the wind changed once more, a layer of dust blew into her eye. She had considered it once, but not like this, not with her face in the dirt. A mule cart went by at some point, a man cursing to his beast. She opened her mouth, but nothing emerged. He never halted. Eventually, someone else on horseback, perhaps a soldier, she couldn't say through the glare. He reined in. She could feel his eyes as pointed as a nail. Then he turned and went away. After that, she ceased to expect aid. The pain went flat, sunk low beneath all the other sensations. She was tired, so tired she could hardly notice it. Another horse rode in late in the day, slower this time. Not trotting, walking. The rider wasn't searching for anyone. His name was Jed Hartley, 34, a carpenter. Not the sort who constructed houses, but wagon yokes, wheel spokes, and coffins when necessary. He lived by himself on the outskirts of town. Folks would see him sanding or hammering in front of his shop, always in silence. Never to the saloon, never to church. Most people referred to him as odd, but handy. He'd just come back from a 3-day trek into the hills, his packhorse laden with scrap metal, oak boards, and worn leather. He intended to be home before nightfall. But then he spotted it, the tattered tent, the motionless form. He braked unconsciously, boots crunching on the ground. No squinting, no feeling, only cool analysis. The canvas ripped. The woman within faintly aware. Her arm jerked spasmodically as the breeze stirred. He walked forward until his shadow fell on her face. She winced. "You awake?" he asked. His voice was low and even, not cruel. Miriam couldn't talk, but she nodded weakly. He bent down beside her, moving with the soft ease of someone accustomed to working near the ground. He could see now her legs weren't broken, just wrong. She wasn't bruised, just emaciated and immobile. Her eyes were better than he had hoped. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. She blinked, attempting to voice her protest, but her throat betrayed her. Jed got to his feet, opened his saddlebag, and produced a jar of beans. He twisted the top off and left it beside her, tender. Then he vanished behind the tent. She panicked in her chest. Was he going to? But no. She heard the metal clinking of poles being drawn. He came back with 2 long fence rails and a bundle of leather straps. Gently, deliberately, he bound them to a stretcher. He folded a rag and wrapped it over the top rail to pat her head, stuffed folded cloth in the center. Then he knelt again. "This will hurt," he warned. He lifted her. She cried out, sharp and raw. Her spine lit up with pain, but his arms were careful. Not jerky, not cruel. He laid her on the stretcher, adjusted her position, strapped her insecurely. Her breathing was rapid, shallow. "You all right?" She nodded again. He tied the stretcher to his horse, leaving her head slightly elevated. Then, without a word, they walked. Slowly, step by dusty step. The sky shifted overhead, colors deepening as the sun fell behind the hills. The town paid no mind. Jed's shop sat on the far edge, where the road met dry brush. A squat one-room structure with slanted tin roofing and a crooked door that groaned when opened. The yard was strewn with timber, wool rims, and hand tools left prodded into the ground. He brought her inside. The air smelled of cedar, leather, and charred oil. A cot rested low in the corner. A cold stove sat alongside the wall. His workbench, littered with clamps and blades, filled the center. He put her down on the cot and fixed the blanket. She flinched, but said nothing, then clung to the edge with fingers. He brought the bean jar over and sat down beside her. She breathed out, struggled to reach and missed. He didn't say anything, didn't try to comfort her, just left her to eat. She took 2 bites before her gut churned. Enough. He turned back to his workbench and continued to sand a wooden yoke. Back to her, steady and slow movement. He didn't look over, but he heard her breathing, the mattress shifting slightly, the clink of the spoon. When her cup spilled later on, he spun around at once, went over and mopped it up in silence, placed it back, returned to work. As night fell, he lit the lamp and inspected the stove, opted not to light it. Too warm still. At bedtime, he fetched a second blanket and arranged it across her legs. She said nothing, but her throat constricted. No one had ever done that to her in years. He did not sleep immediately, labored late into the evening as the oil in the lamp burned out. The room was still but not chill. Miriam lay awake for some time, her eyes open in the darkness. She was not yet safe, but she was not afraid. And for the first time in days, her thoughts ceased racing towards death. She allowed her eyes to close. This time she slept. She awoke before dawn, confused. The bed under her was too flat, the room too quiet. The scent of wood and metal alien, but not hostile. Fingers clutched the blanket spread over her legs. Recollection came in pieces. The scratch of sanding, the quiet charity of a blanket spread softly rather than thrown. She shifted her head. Jed slept in the corner, hunched in a chair against the workbench. Arms folded, chin down, boots still on. A cold lamp next to him, leaning against a coil of twine and a chisel. Sawdust stuck to his shirt sleeves, and his chest came up and went down with the steady breathing of a man too weary to dream. Miriam's body hurt in places that were old and familiar, places she'd stopped paying attention to long ago. Her shoulders ached from the way he'd lifted her. Her back hurt where the pain flared, and the flesh of her wrists burned where the stretcher straps had burrowed. But this hurt was not the same. This was not abandonment. This was healing. And healing, no matter how ugly, meant she was still alive. She absorbed her environment. The workshop was cramped, but tidy. Wooden shelving filled the walls, everyone jammed with pots of nails, tools, glue, and rolls of cloth. A thin table with 2 mismatched chairs stood beneath the sole window, the glass misted coolly by the preternatural chill. The room wasn't adorned, it was inhabited, designed for one. And yet there she sat. She didn't stir much. Her body forbade it. But she moved enough to reach the tin of water beside her cot. Her hand wrapped comfortably around it. He'd put it within reach intentionally. She drank slowly, carefully. Jed stirred some 20 minutes later. He didn't jump at seeing her awake. Simply rubbed the sleep from his eyes, stood up with a groan, and arched his back until joints cracked. Then, without saying a word, he went to the stove and started making breakfast. Miriam observed. He extracted a small sack of ground cornmeal out of a crate, scooped it out in a bowl, poured water over it, stirred it up with his finger, and filled the hot skillet with the mixture. When he had a fire burning, there was the aroma of toasting corn. Then and only then did he talk. "Fire bother you?" "No," she said in a low voice. He nodded, did not say anything more, and continued cooking. She had not spoken more than a handful of words in 3 days. Her voice sounded raw, raspy from lack of use. Most folks never asked her anything she ever had an answer to. But Jed, for all he said, gave her room to reply if she chose to. After the bread browned, he formed 2 little rounds. He cut one in half, put the pieces on a wooden plate and the other whole one with them, and set it beside her with no flourish or remark. She looked at it for a moment, then raised her eyes. "You live here?" "Yeah. By myself since I was 24. She nearly asked why. Where was his family? But she did not. She nodded and took a piece of the bread. It was coarse but warm, the kind that filled you up slowly. She ate silently. He didn't glance her way. Simply went back to the workbench, grabbed a leather strap, and started threading it through a partially completed stirrup. She finished her bread in silence, her fingers greasy with heat and cornmeal. "Why'd you bring me?" He didn't raise his head. "You needed assistance." "That's it." "Yeah." She stared at him a few seconds longer, then leaned back and let her head rest against the wooden frame of the cot. The sunlight had begun to creep in through the window, warming the floor and the edge of the blanket across her lap. "I'm not much use," she muttered. He paused in his work for just a moment, then resumed. "I don't need yous." It wasn't sharp the way it would have cut her if it were cold and she were awake. It was just final. The words sank into her like a stone in quiet water. No man ever said that before. Her whole life had been calibrated on what she could, how silently she could do it, and if it was sufficient. And when it wasn't, they always managed to remind her. Jed went to a corner cabinet, took out a folded dress, and laid it on the floor beside her cot. It was plain, light brown, hand-sewn, stitched in spots, but clean. "Not sure what you had," he said. "This might do better for now." She glanced down at the outfit she had on, her dress, frayed at the bottom, sweaty, crusted with dust. She hadn't even realized how bad it was. Her throat constricted. "Can I wash?" "There's a wash basin outside," he said. "I'll bring it in." Before she could answer, he stepped out. When he returned, he carried a steel basin filled with cold well water, a bar of pine-scented soap, and a clean cloth. He placed them gently on the table beside her cot, then turned his back. "I'll stay out of the way." She did not stir at first. The privacy startled her. No gawking, no inquiring, just room. Gradually, leaning against the cot rail, she stretched to grasp the basin. Her body was sluggish to move, stiff from days of no food or water. But she made it. She washed what she could: face, neck, arms, hands. She did not change dresses, not yet. But she washed, and that was something. Jed never turned. "Done," she finally said. He took the basin outside and left the door ajar for air. It was a warming day. She watched him from where she lay. "You don't ask questions." He glanced up. "You want me to?"
No.
He nodded. "All right, then." That quiet, strange as it was, provided her with something she hadn't realized she required: space to breathe. Later that day, he came back with a small pile of rags and a piece of leather. He didn't say anything, just left them on her lap. She looked at the package. "You sew?" he said. She nodded toward the leather. "Can you use your hands? You can assist me in stitching grips. If not, no trouble." Her fingers paused over the frayed leather, clumsy, hesitant, but they recalled. She started stitching, her shoulders hunched, her forehead low. The feel of it returned, slow but stabilizing. In the corner of the room, Jed returned to sanding a wagon yoke. No one visited the shop that day. Only the sound of their labors, the heaviness of mutual silence, and something quieter unfurling between. At sundown, she'd sewn a half-grip, trembled in her arms, her hands throbbed, but something had moved in her chest. She wasn't just lying there anymore. And when Jed laid a little wooden box at her cot, filled with more pieces sorted by size, she knew. He wasn't just keeping her alive. He was clearing room for her to remain. The third morning dawned chilly and damp, a mist clinging outside the window and the scent of damp wood lingering in the air. Jed was up early. Miriam heard the door click shut behind him as he went out before dawn. But this time she didn't freak out. He'd left the water in easy reach. covered her legs with an extra blanket. He'd return. She levered herself up slowly, holding onto the frame of the cot. Her arms ached from sewing the day before, but it was an honest hurt. The sort that resulted from work accomplished, not blows received. The wooden box remained next to her, now filled with new spools of thread and fresh leather pieces, arranged in sizes. That small thing lingered with her longer than she anticipated. An hour went by before she heard the clomping of hooves. Jed came back, slung canvas sack over his shoulder, bucket of water in the other hand. Fresh mud was printed on the floor behind his boots. He said nothing at first. "Sleep all right?" he finally asked, still not glancing her way. "Think so. Hungry?" She nodded. He took out a little wheel of cheese, 2 eggs, and a piece of bread cloth wrapped. He cooked in silence carefully, heat the pan, crack the eggs, toast the bread, cut the cheese. The aroma filled the air, filled the space with something that seemed like memory. Miriam didn't know how much she had missed the smell of food lovingly prepared. He placed the plate near her and handed her a fork. "You ever cook?" he asked. He had handed her a mug. She was surprised by the warmth, also by the tension in her hands as she cradled it. Breakfast over, Jed went back to shaping a chair leg. She sat standing close beside him, observing his motions, level, even unhurried. She questioned whether he'd always been like that, or if there had been something that had altered him. "Ever consider leaving?" she asked abruptly. Jed's gaze snapped up, and he stared at her, surprised. "Leaving the shop? Everything?"
No.
"Why not?" "Because I built this. It's the one thing that didn't leave me." His response lingered with her long after the exchange was over. Later, past midday, Jed went out to get more scrap wood. Miriam took the opportunity to move towards the crate of cloth beside the stove. Her arms were stronger now. Her hips directed the movement, though her legs remained limp. She reached into the crate, unfolded a delicate beige handkerchief with stitched edges. Such delicate stitching, clearly done by someone who was careful. She examined it a long time before returning it to its place and settling back in her seat. That evening, Jed brought in a box and set it beside her cot. He didn't say anything. Inside, she found what looked like the base of a seat, 4 carved wool mounts, a center cutout, leather straps, half-shaped handles. Crude, but intentional. She practiced every gesture like scripture. By midday, she had trimmed and fitted 3 wooden slats into a crate. Her hands were crimson, blistered. "You take a break," Jed told him. "I need gloves," she said. He laughed, and the sound was little more than a breath. "I'll fashion some out of scrap hide later. So I'm useful now at last," she joked. Jed braced against the bench. "You've been valuable since you threaded that grip." She looked away, then hid the emotion she did not want him to notice. Later, at the basin, she washed her hands and caught sight of herself in the metal. Her face fuller, shoulders straighter. Even her voice had gentled over the past few days. She didn't quite know the woman who was staring back, and she didn't dislike it. They had dinner on the porch that night. Jed had pulled up 2 chairs, one wooden, one hers, with a plank stuck under the left wheel so it wouldn't roll. They sat sitting there and watching the dust drift off the hills. A hawk flew overhead. A coyote barked once, then ceased. "Still think about them?" Jed asked. "The ones who left you?" She nodded. "Sometimes I dream they come back. Not to say sorry, just to take me again." His jaw clicked. "They won't come back," he said. "But if they do, they won't touch you." She believed him. That was new, too. She rolled her head. "Why haven't you been into town recently?" He paused. "Don't want to be away from you again. I can take care of myself." He nodded. "I know, but still. Don't trust people, do you?" she said. "Not most." "Why not? Because of your brother?" He hesitated, then answered, "Partly. He was burned to death. I could have prevented it. The town knew the roof was bad. I warned him. They didn't care." She didn't flinch. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Jed nodded, leaned in a second time, slower, deeper. She did not hesitate. Her hand closed on his collar, firm. This heat was no longer from shock. It was deserved. When they broke away, he asked, "You still don't think I exist?" She smiled, certain now. "I think I do." They didn't go back to opposite corners of the shop that evening. Jed unrolled a mattress by the stove, low, simple, wool and canvas, next to her cot. He did not ask. He simply did it. She rolled over and put her hand on his. "I want to lie close tonight," she said. "Not for safety. For me." He did not reply. He just took her hand and guided her to lie next to him, slow and gentle, the way he did everything, with respect. When she leaned her head against the crook of his shoulder, he laid his cheek on her hair. There were no vows spoken. There were no vows necessary. The distance between them was simply vanished. Jed awoke before dawn as he always did. But he did not move. Miriam slept curled against him, her gentle breathing against his chest. Her hand covered his heart. Her hair spread across his shoulder, legs awkwardly tucked in. She had not yet learned to sleep easily on her side. But she was making an effort, and she had not asked for assistance. She did not require it. He sat with her a while, then eased slowly out from under the covers. She required rest. Her arms had shaken from labor the previous day, and he'd watched the red welt that was rising on her palm where the wheel wore her raw. Carefully, he banked the stove and stepped outside the back. Didn't even need the hammer. He didn't smile, not quite, but his hand found hers, steady and warm. "You're not going anywhere." "I wasn't planning to," she replied, her voice soft but sure. They sat by the stove in silence once more, as they had so many nights before. No words needed, just being. Jed reached into one of the paper packages and drew out a delicate silver ring. It glinted like a whisper. "It's not much," he said with a near apology. "But it belongs to you." She gazed at it, then looked up at him with eyes that had been taught to hope and doubt simultaneously. "I don't need proof," she replied. "I do," he whispered, putting the ring on her finger. Fit just right. She did not weep, but her hand shook slightly as she curled it into her chest, cradling it as if something precious. "I want to begin making something new," he said, speaking low and firmly. "Like what?" "A room out back. More windows. More light." "For what?" "For our child," he said softly. Miriam's eyes widened. "I haven't told you yet." "You didn't have to," he said. She laughed, surprised, then covered her mouth with her hand. Laughter wasn't something she'd expected to come so easily again. They didn't say anything else for a while. The stove crackled, throwing soft light across the wood-grain floor. Outside, the wind had picked up. Winter was creeping in. But inside that shop, inside that quiet life, they were steady. Miriam leaned her head on Jed's shoulder. "I never thought I'd end up loved." "You didn't end up here," he said. "You earned it." And that was the truth. In a world where the people were left behind with no apology, where silence cut more deeply than cruelty, where survival stood in for connection, they had remained. In a town that had turned its back on them both, they had made something real. Slow, quiet, flawed, but steadfast. And finally, for the first time in a very long time, they weren't alone anymore.